You're in tune to the FuseBox Radio Broadcast.
Turn the music up inside my session. These folks gotta hear my message.
Bringing balanced black radio to the masses.
All right, everybody. 1 2 1 2. What's going on? You're now in tune to a special session of the syndicated worldwide FuseBox Radio Broadcast, bringing the balance back to black radio each and every single week, whether it's via our commentary, music mixes, interviews, and more. We got a little bit of more in stock right now with some panel audio from this year's AwesomeCon 2018 that was held at the Washington Convention Center here in our nation's capital and all of that. I was over there this Saturday getting in a lot of pictures. I'm talking to various folks and stuff like that. And I'm also, again, capturing some pretty cool audio from some of the panel action that went down. And this first panel was called The Future of Beer. It was held in conjunction with the Smithsonian Institution as a part of their FutureCon programming that was in the mix of everything that was happening with AwesomeCon. And for those who might be new to the show, I'm a craft beer drinker. We know a lot of folks who are into that type of thing and whatnot. And as one of those people, as well as a person who's interested in that industry and knowing that a bunch of black folks and other folks of color are getting more into this on the recreational and business ends, I thought this would be a good panel to roll through and hit up. And they get into a whole lot of things in regards to the business, the actual literal future of beer. Like one of the folks who is a beer historian with Smithsonian got into some things. We have some folks who are actually trying to craft beer for space and all other types of good stuff, including people who are in the mix doing things in the business right now as independent brewers and stuff. So go on ahead and check out this audio, listen and enjoy. You can go to awesomecon.com for more information about what went down this year and the program that they have coming up next year. And for the FuseBox Radio Broadcast, you can always check out what we do via our official website, FuseboxRadio.com, FuseboxRadio.com, for show archives, our history, how to reach out to us for interviews, submitting music, booking for upcoming events, whether it's on the DJ or speaker end, or plenty more. So let's get into this Future of Beer panel from AwesomeCon 2018. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right. This is DJ Fusion. We're about to get into this mix of talk right here. Peace.
I'm Fritz Hahn, a reporter about beer with the Washington Post, and I'm here with Teresa McCullough, who has possibly the coolest job in America as the Smithsonian's beer historian. Also joined Teresa Franz Linz, who was the author of a recent Smithsonian Magazine article on the future of beer in space and whether or not we will be, when we get to Mars, if we will be able to have beer there. And finally, at the end, we have Kurt Kroll, who is the brewer of Manor Hill in Ellicott City. He's responsible for the RoboFuel beer that you all are hopefully enjoying. All right, so I'm just going to throw out a quick question to the group here, just as a way to start. So 2 years ago, I wrote a story for the Post that said there was never a better time to be a beer drinker in American history. And 2 years later, and 2,000 more breweries later, I think I can say that I was wrong. And this might be the best time to be a beer drinker in American history, with the emergence of new styles and the refinements of brewing. But at the same time, I'm sure you all saw the numbers from the Brewers Association this week that said while there are more brewers than ever, craft beer growth is not really going as well as it has been in the last couple of years. And so just to kind of start this, I'd like to ask each of you, what is the most exciting thing for you about beer and craft beer right now? And what's one thing that scares you?
I'll take that first. So as Fritz mentioned, my happy job is to collect the history of beer and brewing at the Smithsonian. I work at the National Museum of American History. And we're building an archive specifically related to the histories of homebrewing and craft beer in America. And so I travel around the country, I meet brewers and growers and writers and all kinds of figures involved in this very dynamic industry. And what impresses me most, I would say, at the moment, the stars are really kind of aligning between professional craft brewers, brewing beer consumers, and also homebrewers. The American Homebrewers Association counts 1.1 million homebrewers in the country right now. How many homebrewers do we have? So you have this very dynamic sector. You have craft brewers who are experimenting with all kinds of amazing techniques and ingredients and are finding a very eager public. When Ken Grossman, who founded Sierra Nevada Brewing Company in the late 1970s, when he brewed his pale ale, which is really considered this iconic beer today, it was considered so intensely bitter, far too hoppy for the American public. It was shocking. They said they really couldn't get rid of their beer, but that's what they wanted to drink, and then consumers came along. But now, suddenly, in this really amazing golden age of beer, you have brewers and eager consumers and home brewers who are all really fueling this fantastic situation we have at the moment. Maybe I'll leave it on a positive note, and then we can come back to what scares us.
Well, the most exciting part right now is you have no limitations. There's no sticking to a guideline. You can do a pour and throw whatever flavor you want in it, and nobody's going to turn their nose as they used to back in the day. Like coffee stomps were a big thing a while ago, but now you can do it in the winter. It's like fruit. I've never eaten boysenberry before, and we're using this. It's just something new to try, and that's the exciting part about all this. It's open. There's so many choices you have. You just have to find what you're excited about and go with it.
Well, I don't know if I'm excited, but it's pretty interesting. Some of the crap they're throwing into beer, because it goes from people, a brewer, road beer, growing yeast in his own beer, and then they're culturing that and an entire product. There's stag semen. I have not personally. There's even this thing, I just saw it. It's looking like, can't quite get my head around it, but it's this guy in Poland had a crowdfunding campaign to make beer out of vaginal bacteria. And so there's actually so anyway, wanted to raise $200,000 in the campaign. He raised $2,000. Not enough people were interested, but he picked it up and said for $15,000 you can make beer made out of, well, this is Texas now, your girlfriend's vaginal bacteria, and that never took off. So there are all kinds of strange variations of beer. I mean, if you look at Dogfish Head, they made beer out of what's called or whatever. It was made out of in part meteorite dust, which kind of speed up the fermentation. And what I expect someday is that, when you have bespoke beers, somebody will say, well, can you put a little more asteroid in that? So that's my answer.
And let's talk a little about what you guys see that might be a little more worried in the future.
So in terms of worrying, I think that's a numbers game. As Fritz mentioned, craft beer last year, the segment grew 5% by volume, but overall beer consumption in America stayed flat. You have 1,000 breweries opened in America in 2017. It's a truly amazing number. So you have this great growth in very small breweries. You have pressure from above, from the big breweries. You've been reading Attuned to Beer News. You are very aware that very big multinational beer conglomerates are quite interested in the craft segment and looking to purchase craft breweries. And so you have especially a very difficult story for mid-sized regional breweries who are in the middle. They're kind of being squeezed from below, they're being squeezed from above. And what this means for you as consumers or brewers is when you go to the store to purchase beer, perhaps you might see some of your favorite beers disappearing from shelves. Or when you go to the bar down the street, maybe favored regional breweries disappearing off of the lineup of taps, just because of all this jockeying that's happening to a certain extent behind the scenes. And so I think there's a lot of questions out there about where the future of beer is. There's a lot of talk about a craft bubble. And so, at the moment, the landscape is quite good, especially if you're a beer drinker. But if you're a brewer, there's a lot to think about.
comes with all the choices and flavors you can use. And one of the most scariest things is all the flavors and choices you have. It's just trying to keep up with current trends, our own lactose, using fruit, using lots of different stages, just trying to figure out what the next big thing is and keep it going. I used to work for a brewery. We did chocolate peanut butter porters as our main sell, and it was just crazy. We were like, why would anybody buy this? But you always have to try and find a new flavor that people will go for. What's the hottest hop? What is the most, like, what fruit hasn't anybody used before? Do you want to do a sour? Do you want to keep it clean? Do you want to go for dry hop it? Do you not want to dry hop it? Do you want to put it in the back of a barn and let it do its own thing for half a year? There's so many choices you have to do, and it's not as easy as it used to be, where every month you brew an Oktoberfest and you brew a pale ale. It's crazy, all the options that are out there.
Just around actually the world through the story, the consensus I found is that most beer writers seem to think that there'll be a tipping point and be an implosion of all these craft breweries. And when it clears out, there'll be about half of them left. And a big problem, as you alluded to, is that these behemoths, like Budweiser and Coors, is buying up the little breweries and just flattening them and moving them like blob. And that, I think, is the great danger of the beer industry.
So let's go to your story about beer in space, which I found very compelling for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that struck me when I was reading it is the great thing about beer is we all know what it is. It's water, malt, yeast, and hops. Budweiser is beer, Dogfish Head is beer, and even when something like Not Your Father's Root Beer uses similar ingredients, we know it's not really a beer as much as it wants to pretend it is one. But now we hear about these UC Berkeley scientists who are able to genetically modify yeast to provide hoppy flavors and brew a beer without using hops at all. We see people who are modifying hops to try to get different flavors out of them. But when you can brew with a genetically modified yeast and no hops at all, do you think that when you were talking to people about the future, do you think we'll see a time when what we call beer is no longer brewed in the traditional method?
I think it always has a traditional base. How far out that goes is another question. For decades now, there's been sort of a novelty marketing making beer enhancers, which are just sometimes just dumped into the beer you have at hand to make it taste like some other beer or some other liquid. And I don't think beer will ever go away because there's always going to be that back to nature, that's what it is, movement. But I think the flavors themselves get farther and farther out there. Whether they'll circle back to the original beer is another question. Some of those things like, remember Valentine Ale and really old Pabst, they were basically undrinkable. Some of the beers I had,
I have straws in my freezer now.
Yeah. But some of the beers I had, especially like space beers, they tasted sort of like, let's say, Klingon stick, strange through Buzz Aldrin's sock. So, it doesn't necessarily improve the flavor, it's just a different flavor.
And so, Kurt, to go back to some things you were saying earlier about all the new trends we're seeing in beer and how you can't really rely on, or the chase, I would say, for the next big thing to try to get ahead of the curve. You make some interesting beers, like really tropical, fruit forward, but at the same time, when I'm out at bars and I'm talking to beer directors and everything, they always bring up your Rosette, the Mary Hook Rosette, which is a 19th century Belgian style. Mm-hmm. And so what do you think the success of a beer like that, or the popularity of a beer like that, says about where we might be going?
Well, I mean, that style I don't think ever really died off. It stays on kind of farmhouse, brings that flavor. I mean, last year Pilsner has made a major comeback, so we're doing a classic German style as well, and it's selling just like Cruzette. I mean, you have to have those base beers in your repertoire, because you can't do those. When the fruits go in, you don't know what you're doing, and you're going to just disappear, because you have to be able to do each one to a certain style, make it taste traditional, but put your own little flair in it, not too craziness, but people do need a basis to go back to. Remember what beer used to taste like versus what it tastes like today. Because you do have to know what IPAs were like 5 years ago versus what they are this year. Has that drastically changed? I just got hired here about 2 years ago almost, and I learned so much more about IPAs than I ever thought I would, and I've been doing this for almost a decade now. So.
And what, just out of curiosity, out of a ratio, what percent of your beer drinkers, of the American drinkers, do you think are chasing these new flavors versus looking for the more traditional?
A lot. Half of them, at least. I mean, our IPAs are big sellers, but it's traditional. It clears out. It's not that easy anymore. But we also do untapped IPAs with fruit, extra hops, biotransformation, which you'll never be able to do with just yeast. You have to throw a physical hops in. But you know, it just has to happen. We're chasing both angles, and hopefully we're doing it pretty well, because I can't brew fast enough these days. So.
Teresa, if you could, just give us some historical context at this point. Has there ever been a period in American history that you would compare to, say, the last 5 to 10 years of craft brewing and the rise, tripling the number of breweries in America? Has there ever been a period like that before in our history, and what kind of lessons can we learn from it?
Sure. So if you, our current era of beer history has come to be known as the craft beer revolution, and it's been called a revolution because it was a response against big beer, the homogenous big beer in the mid-20th century, what followed Prohibition. But the first brewing revolution that we commonly recognize in American brewing history happened more than 100 years before that, and that came with this huge wave of German immigrants in the 19th century. And so at the very beginning of American history, you have Americans brewing at home, drinking mostly English-style ales. But then in the 1830s, 40s, and onward, you have millions of immigrants who came over from Europe and brought very different brewing styles. This is a lager brewing technique. And so from 1830 to 1880, you have, I would say, literally every sector of brewing and beer in America changed. Who was brewing? Suddenly you had immigrant German men who made brewing into a big business in America. You went from home production to professional production in large-scale breweries. What beer tasted like changed. Again, you went from kind of a heavy, stagnant style of ale to these very effervescent, refreshing lagers. Americans were just very entranced by this new style that tasted quite different. Where you drank also changed in that span. You went from drinking at home to drinking at the saloon or perhaps at the beer garden. That was a very family-friendly option. For the first time, men and women and even kids could go and enjoy beer together at the time. And then, just the purpose of beer in American life changed during that era as well. It became something that was a kind of hallmark of the end of your day. If you worked in a factory, you earned a little bit of extra change, you wanted to spend it, relax at the end of the day, and that's the role that beer came to play in American life. So certainly that span of, I'd say, about 2 generations, the beer totally transformed in America. I think the lesson you can learn from that is that American beer became great because of the many different kinds of people who fed into brewing culture. That immigrants who came and had different techniques and different flavor preferences and different ideas about how and where to consume beer, that all created ultimately what became, I would argue, has been the world's greatest beer culture. And countries around the world now take their cue from what Americans are brewing. And you see a similar kind of craft beer revolution happening in Japan and China and Italy and Brazil and elsewhere. And it really all started at this point.
I just want to say one thing. Go back to the point, will beer ever go away? Well, traditional German Gose have been kind of maybe a low-lying beer away in this country. And then there are a couple of breweries, Eagle Twin comes to mind, and Dogfish Head, put out their own poses. The newest one, which is the hottest selling actually Dogfish Head has, is sea quench, which is sea salt and black lime and lime. And so it's already sort of tricked up Goza. It's come around, and this is a new variation. So I don't think it'll go away as much as evolve into something else.
So, Fred, I'm going to jump back to the space again, in the future things. But another thing that leapt out of me in your story was the automated brewing intelligence. And for the crowd, this is basically an algorithm that they use after you try the beer. You're asked a series of questions to determine how much you like it. The information gets sent back to the brewer, and then they can tweak the recipe from there. I think that's kind of the basic gist of it. And if you go by what Beer Advocate ratings are on their website, they're the most highly rated, highly popular beers. They all tend to be bourbon barrel stouts and imperial IPAs. I'm just kind of curious what you think the future of this artificial intelligence is and how it might shape what we want or what we think we want to drink in the future.
Well, go back to one of your earlier points about the danger and the creepiness of some of these beers, since this is basically has, at least in the beginning, no input from humans. And it brought to mind, I actually wrote that here, that Google, a little bit off the fact that Google stores your location. Every time you turn on the phone, you can see a timeline of where you've been from the very first day you started using Google on your phone. Google also knows everything you've ever searched for and deleted is stored in Google. Google stores search histories across all your devices. That can mean even if you delete your search history and phone history on one device, you may still have saved data saved from other devices. Google has an advertising profile of you, and that it creates an advertising profile based on your information, including your location, gender, age, hobbies, career interests, relationship status, possible weight, and income. They also know all the apps you use, all your YouTube history, access your webcam and microphone, knows which events you attended and when, and Google stores all the information you thought you deleted. So, when people wonder if, like a Roomba making beer is going to be a threat to their beer drinking, I would personally be more concerned about Google than an automated device. But what I think will happen is that right now the beers are pretty flat in their way. And they've got no real character because it's just sort of a conglomeration of other beers and people's ideas of what they want without actually sort of tasting it. And that puts it a little behind it.
You're talking about the beers that are brewed with the artificial intelligence.
Right, the API beers, as they call them. So at this point, it's so early, there's really no distinctive flavors. I mean, they're bespoke beers, they're made for individuals, but still they have no distinctive character. And I think if we ever get to the point, and this again depends on the expertise of the brewmeister, that they are something different, then it could possibly take beer and breweries in a new direction. But at this point, it's really premature.
Kurt, I'd like to hear your thoughts on artificial intelligence recommendations that are coming from computers and algorithms. One of the things I always hear when I talk to brewers, and I just had one tell me this week, is we brew the kind of beer we want to drink. Just kind of a mantra for craft beer guys. Would you be comfortable taking advice from a computer algorithm about what your next beer should be?
No. I mean, it is business, and sales are the main drive for every brewery. If you brew a beer, you brew what you want to drink, but but sometimes nobody else wants to drink it. I mean, it takes a lot of finesse and human drive or control. I don't think software will ever get to that point because nobody will let press on pause and then let this program write a recipe for them, because everybody wants to have their own little flavor with their own opinion, how they do all the rest and all that stuff, but I don't see that taking off very much because it's a personal thing for every brewer saying, this is a part of me, how do I handle you? We all heard an IPA, but this one's a little different because I did it this way, or this other brewery did it that way. And I don't know if the software will ever match that kind of effect. So,
just to the point of high-tech innovations or aspirations related to beer, I was looking at a Wall Street Journal article from 1960 the other week, and there was a mention of breweries' attempts to cut transportation costs by coming up with an instant beer tablet. And the idea was that they would sell these tablets to consumers, and you would pop it in a glass of carbonated water at home, and suddenly you would have your instant beer. And clearly that never came to fruition, likely because it tasted disgusting. Attempts in all eras to think about really kind of bizarre methods to make American beer better.
So, Kurt, to follow up with you again, so one of the things that I always hear from brewers these days, though, is you could be making the best beer in the world, but that doesn't matter if you can't get it in front of people, if nobody's drinking it. I always go back to the story that when we were talking about, so the beer that won the best American IPA in a blind tasting at the Great American Beer Conference last year, it's called Prairie Madness from Hailstorm Brewing in Illinois. I still have never met anyone who's tried it. But in a blind tasting of the biggest category, hundreds of beers, it was the best IPA in America. So I'm curious for you, what are some of the challenges that you're facing getting beer in front of people, and how could that shape what you do in the future?
Well, it all depends on the size of the brewery alone first. We only distribute in Maryland and a little bit of DC. So the easiest part about beer is making it. The hardest part is selling it. It's that simple. I mean, you could do the greatest IPA that will never reach the GABF and never be judged, but if it doesn't go farther or enough people haven't heard of it. I mean, there are countrywide trades where people send boxes to California, send stuff from California over here. That's a big trade, like black market kind of thing. That's weird. But it's just a lot of these breweries popping up are very, very small, and they will not get out very far. You'll never hear half these breweries, and never try them. And that's the one thing about this new craft business, is they're all small. And a lot of these places are getting too small to be big, and some of them are too big to be small. And it's just getting out, just listening to people. I mean, there's enough apps where you can try and go play. Every time I go to a different state, the first place I look for is a brewery. Just to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And that's the only way I'll know about it, because you have to travel, and liquid is very limited.
So distribution has been, to Kurt's point, has been a big deal lately. We've seen a number of states like Maryland who are cutting back, putting new onerous kind of law regulations on breweries that want to distribute. On the other hand, we're seeing new states like Georgia who decide that you can now buy beer at breweries, which is a novel concept. Can you talk a little bit about the trends that we've seen, at least going back to why we have this kind of distribution going back to Prohibition?
Sure. So in the lead up to Prohibition, as I mentioned, saloon culture was very prominent in American life. You had millions of immigrants who came to America and became workers. Again, they wanted to drink at saloons at the end of the day. And so suddenly you have saloons on virtually, it seemed like, every street corner in America. In the lead up to Prohibition, 80% of those saloons were tied to breweries. That means that breweries directly sponsored saloons. They sold their beer in those saloons, but they also supplied the furnishings, the ornamentation, the trays that beers might have been served onto. And as temperance advocates and other groups tried to lobby for Prohibition, they really wanted to break up this kind of relationship between saloon culture and breweries and how beer got to consumers. So they wanted to make it more difficult. And so after Prohibition, there was this innovation to break up what was essentially this straight line between beer and the consumer. And so you have very complicated patchwork system in terms of how beer gets to you, whether you want to buy beer in a store, whether you want to buy beer from a brewery. The laws are different throughout the country, and so actually it's a legacy of prohibition, the very patchwork nature of where and how and when you can buy alcohol throughout the country.
And so let's talk a little bit about competition for beer. At last year's Craft Brewers Conference, the Brewers Association Director Paul Gatza talked specifically about the threat that the legalization of marijuana might pose for beer, and the idea that people might shift from measured beer drinking to measured marijuana smoking. And then we've also seen market studies that say millennials are drinking less beer and more wine and spirits. What do you think about these kind of shifting attitudes, and where could that take us as well?
Well, that's it. Going back to that, Budweiser was long the number one beer in the country. Now, Bud Light is so. Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Light. I always thought Coors Light was redundant, but people I think like. Budweiser comes from a Czech beer called Budweiser in Slovakia. And it tastes nothing like it, right? And they've refused. In fact, Budweiser has tried to buy Budweiser in Czechoslovakia and been rebuffed every time. And I think what people have always liked about Budweiser is sort of its blandness, deepness, its stability. You know exactly what you're getting, even, if some people think it tastes like this or whatever. But it doesn't have that sense of adventure that craft beer does. Now, craft beer, statistics, I guess, that is less than 20%, 13% of beer sold in this country is craft beer. I think people in the industry think it may creep up to 20 at some point, but you get, the behemoths like Coors, Budweiser, whatever, are selling this known product to the majority of the population. It's sort of like, people moving into developments. They know exactly what they're getting. The houses, you can even buy a house that's exactly like the one you left, and there's no effort put into it, and there's no challenge to it. So,
Well, I'm just curious about whether we think, the increased competition, are people going to turn away from beer in search of other recreational drugs or recreational beverages?
Well, I think maybe, but I think the trend is going upwards still with craft beer, and while it it is not exactly plummeting or falling with the behemoths, find some kind of middle ground. Because even when marijuana was illegal, believe it or not, people were drinking beer.
Anecdotally, my research, I have asked brewers this question, especially in my trips to Colorado and Northwest. What I've heard is if people who drink beer, they're going to drink beer. If you want to smoke, they're going to smoke. They see it as kind of the separate realms, perhaps complementary in some senses, but not directly competitive. But Kurt probably could answer this better as a brewer.
People can get marijuana illegally. They're going to get it legal now. They're going to get it. It's just easy to get. People if they want to smoke weed, they'll smoke weed. That won't affect beer drinking. I don't think at all, because it's accessible, but it's easy to get now.
You ever try to have a marijuana flavored beer?
Lagunitas did one last year that was actually flavored with THC crystals.
Yeah, there was
it was very dank.
In the early 90s, there was a brewery, I forget who did it, they did a hemp beer, and apparently they never brewed it again.
Taps is doing it right now.
Oh, are they doing it right now?
Yeah, I read an article about it this morning.
Well, more power to
I think the problem is keeping the factory workers in the factory.
So before we open the floor to audience questions, just want to have one last go through for each of you. What were you drinking craft beer wise or beer wise 5 years ago? What are you drinking now, and what do you think you'll be drinking in the future? If the sky was the limit.
Well, 5 years ago, I worked for breweries, so I was drinking stuff I was making. Let's just say I started craft beer in like 1998, drinking that. I started on brewing in 2003. I was drinking Pete's Wicked. Then it evolved to Dr. Show when they first came out, and then I only like the first 6. They got too crazy. I got away from it. And then, like last 5 years, it was what I was brewing at the brewery I was at. And a couple years ago, I'll probably be beer I'm drinking at the brewery I'm working at. It's one of the perks of working for a brewery. Because I've been to liquor stores, and I'm happy people are willing to pay those prices. I do too, but I spend more money at bars.
You just go from beer to beer. Yeah, I was drinking, my favorite beer was always Guinness in Ireland, and it just does not travel. So when you get it here, and they tried all kinds of, carbonators. And there's nothing comparable to the Dublin. So, yeah. So, I guess that's an answer.
5 years ago, let's see, I went to school in Boston, so probably something like an IPA. And, again, through my research, I have found a lot of brewers say that they feel IPAs appeal to many Americans because a lot of the flavors are pretty distinct. You can taste citrus, you can taste pine, you can taste grapefruit, and so that's often a way to kind of get someone in, persuade them to be a beer drinker, kind of have them notice particular flavors, and then move on to other things. What is in my fridge now? Let's see, I have a Trogs mix pack. I have some. Probably a good example of how beer travels from drinker to drinker these days. I have some beers from Tired Hands Brewing Company in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. But these weren't available in DC, but they were passed. Two cans were given a friend to a friend and gave it to me, and so that's a good example of something that prompts enthusiasm for people, and you can kind of pass it on. What will be happening in 5 years? I'm interested in Asian beers and among other things, and so there's some beers sitting in my parents' basement in Richmond, and probably let those sit there for a little bit longer.
Should I ask which ones those are?
It's a Bell's. Yeah. So that's one for you, but I'm sure there are many interesting responses to this kind of question out there.
Also, I'm kind of waiting for Billy beers to make it come back.
All right, so if we have questions, we have a microphone up here if anyone wants to come up. Here's where I put some time.
Enough for everyone.
Okay, so when I was in Czech Republic, I wound up going to a beer spa, and that was incredible. I don't know if you guys have ever tried something like that, where they actually they have taps, like a tap for something sitting there, like it just has beer, and it seems so weird. It's like when we get beer, this new little trend, like they're constantly growing.
So, one of the things I like is I was in Scotland in Aberdeen, and they have brewdog beer, all kinds of variations, and so they call themselves the world's first pumpkin for various reasons, like they tried all kinds of stunts, Buckingham Palace, and whatever. So in Columbus, Ohio, they just opened, or they were about to open this summer, something called the Dog House, which has beer massages. They have taps in every room. They have
Including the bathroom, if I remember correctly. They're putting taps in the bathroom so that you can drink a shallow beer.
Right. But there are also taps in the rooms themselves. At the Dog House, I think they're just loading these fridges up in the tower with craft beers handpicked by the owner. But and as I think the CEO was telling me, they decided not to have a swimming pool filled with beer, just because they don't want it.
It might be sticky.
People in the beer affecting the taste of the actual beer in the pool, especially if they pee in it. So that is a trend.
A question for our beer historian. When you went into the role, what is an assumption that you had about beer that you later learned was not the case?
Question is about an assumption I might have had about beer that turned out not to be these. That's a really great question. I think maybe one way to answer that might be to talk about one of the really consistent strands I've found in the story of craft beer in particular as I've been traveling. And again, the Smithsonian's collected to a certain extent on early 20th century, late 19th century history of brewing, but not so much about craft beer and home brewing. And so looking for those stories has taken me out to Northern California, Central Colorado, Seattle, elsewhere around the country, and I just keep finding consistent threads when brewers say, how did they start brewing? A lot of people talk about their enthusiasm for science. They describe themselves as science nerds. They like to tinker. They're alchemists. They like to mix stuff together and find out what happens. And so a lot of people come to beer through science. They come to beer through travel. They come to beer through cooking. They compare brewing to cooking. And then I also hear again and again about this, certainly there's a lot to say about competition in the beer world these days, but just a kind of ethos of collaboration or mentorship. And in the early days you have stories of people sharing yeast strains or sharing equipment or training brewers who went on to work in other places. And so those kinds of stories have really come to the fore as something that's been really consistent, whether you're in Washington State or
you guys were talking about how the marketing of beer is really sort of part of getting into that. What do you think about the controversy between the Keystone marketing campaign and the Stone Brewing problems they're having? And the second question is, do you have a set of breweries that you recommend just go one by one, like a crawl, like that you definitely recommend?
probably a question.
So the Stone Keystone thing is amusing. The idea that they've changed the marketing on the cans of Keystone to just say Stone. I don't really know anyone who confused those two, but I understand the trademark issue with that. But the idea that you would confuse those, so this is from Stone with a gargoyle versus Keystone with no flavor, it's kind of interesting. But I think that's also something we're going to see a lot more of in terms of trademark and copyright in terms of beer. For example, I don't know how people know that Denizens Brewing in Silver Spring was originally going to be named Citizen Brewing, but they got a friendly cease and desist from DC Brown, whose flagship beer is Citizen. So it's just one of those things where we're going to have to see a lot more kind of collaboration rather than litigation. I don't know. That was a certain thing. But in terms of breweries for a crawl, I mean, right now, if you can get a designated driver and head out to Loudoun County, that's basically my favorite thing to do. If I can make my way to Ausar and Solace and Crooked Run and maybe all the way up to a Drink Theory in Purcellville. If I can do that in one afternoon, that's fantastic. In DC, it's pretty easy to do Hellbender and White Proper and DC Brow 3 stars in an afternoon.
I would start with this River Fuel though, which is completely delicious.
Hi, my name is Mary. I just got a quick question in regards to, we're talking about the future of beer. For those of us who want to get into the business above and beyond, making some stuff at home or whatever, what's the best way to connect with people? Like, would it be asking a brewery, hey, can I, apprenticeship under you, or the business things that happen? I was at the craft brewers conference last year, and in person, I was just amazed that this was even the community that was there. Like, how can one get into the mix, especially folks who are like women and other folks who don't necessarily are looked at as people who actually like beer? We obviously probably got this story.
If you can find a brewery that lets you volunteer or work part-time, I would make friends with the brewery first. That's how I did it. I just knew somebody, got a brewing job immediately. There are schools you can go to, they're not cheap, but you can do that, and then you'll still have to search for a job. It's not that easy. There are a lot of breweries out there now, but then they don't need that many people, but I would just try and make friends at a place you want to connect with. It's a lot of physical work, so it's just if you're willing to do it, and people need something, a person who learn, who's willing to learn, I would just have a resume ready, go on, it's Pro Brewer, see what job they're out there, and just try and interview it. Hopefully they'll hire you, and you can learn. I learned on the job a lot of professional stuff.
How did you just be a beer taster?
That costs money. Everybody has that. I just sit at the bar and try everything.
Glad to hear you mention Flip too. Getting off of Flip too, I would also say driving designated driver number 20 minutes west from the abolitionist near where I live. But my actual question is, with a lot of what I classify as recreational drinking, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, there's really a thing of customization. I can order my whiskey sour 100 different ways. I can go to Starbucks. There's a whole scene in You Got Mail where Tom Hanks talks about making 8 decisions in 30 seconds to get coffee. But you don't really get that with beer. You pretty much drink what comes out of the tap, and you can sometimes get one poured over another or get 2 beers mixed. Do you think we're ever going to see like a cocktail culture around beer like there is around alcohol or around coffee?
I've seen some bars do that, but it's what do you mean by cocktail? Just
mixing 2 things at the point set.
I had a guy do a smoked beer with Drambuie, and it would make it taste like a rusty nail. It just depends on the bar. I've seen a lot of places try and do that because they're just trying to do new things, bring new people. But I always went to a bar and tried to mix 2 different flavors together, like around an IPA, just to see what would happen. He's just willing, whoever's running the bar, if they want to do it or not.
Does that also depend on how far along you are?
I know you all talked earlier about marijuana versus beer or beer different flavors of marijuana, but I recently heard a report about a brewery, I can't remember which one, out of Colorado that's actually experimenting with taking marijuana and using that instead of alcohol to try to formulate it to get the same effect of alcohol without any of the adverse effects. And then you were talking about yeast that could be altered to get the hop flavors. So there's 2 different things that you take right out of the equation. Are your thoughts on that similar to the other marijuana and beer issues you talked about, or what were your ideas about that?
I'm not a brewer, but when I read about this, these modified hops, that yeast to function as hops, one question that a reader posed, which I thought was a good one, is that hop serves other purposes, aside from flavoring. It's a preservative, and so I think the question is, what else does alcohol do in the beer that's not just flavor? we feel. There are other impacts that are kind of structural, and so that's just my question. And brewers would probably speak to that.
It changes how they, I don't know, used to stable, shelf stable, stuff like that. It's just, they went for a THC and without the effects, why? Nobody likes, everybody talks about brownies and they don't like eating them, they just want to get high. So I don't know why you do that without the effect. But, the yeast thing is just, there's whole different processes involved, and it might affect their appearance. The flavor will be fantastic, but it won't look like what people are wanting to buy these days just on visuals. So, crystal clear beers are not the thing right now, which drives me up the wall sometimes, because it's just as hard to keep a beer hazy as it is to clear it out inside.
Hi, my name is Malika. I'm from Wisconsin, so great to your state. But the other thing is in Wisconsin is carbon. So the discussion about distribution and very small craft breweries getting squished by the top, I think is really relevant. But I'm wondering if you guys could comment on the impact of, ABC in Virginia, it's having in Wisconsin, and the political angle that, or lobbying that's not allowing, or what the impact of those trade associations are on that distribution happen.
I've heard that one of the biggest success stories in craft beer is Glarus from Wisconsin, and they have the highest penetration of any craft beer in the state. They are one of the biggest brewers in the country, and they don't go outside of Wisconsin. But one of the things that you see with that, and you see with Virginia ABC, every state, with the exception of Washington DC, every state makes the decision about what beers are going to be allowed to be sold there, and that to me is kind of a tenuous thing to begin with. Like, why would you allow beers, one brewery to come in and not another? But I'm sure Teresa can talk about that.
I think I've been surprised too, because maybe to the previous person's question, but I've been surprised at the extent to which politics is very much a part of brewing, and you have many stories of brewers. Many stories of brewers who have had to become activists in a certain sense to make certain actions possible, whether it's selling directly to consumers or making blue stuff legal in the state. So,
politics, every state's different. It just depends on who's in the back, how much you have to fight, and it's just very. There's no national level. It's per state.
I guess the last question.
I guess this is more about consumer behavior in terms of consumption. So, open behavior laws, raising the age 21, and when I was in Beijing, I bought a beer from Beijing. What's the future for buying beers and consuming beers? Legally?
Same question. Depends on the state, depends on the politics, how they want to do it, that's what they're allowed to. Pennsylvania used to sell taste only. When they went to 12 packs, and then you buy 6 packs, and you buy individual bottles, and then put 6-7 years for that to go through. So it just depends on the state.
Louisiana, you can drive through the Dak Shack, as long as you put a little paper top on the straw, you're not there's all kinds of possibilities. It's a good question.
I think one of the things that I'm intrigued about, at least in terms of a legal aspect or a government enforcement aspect, is going to be the rise of tap walls. I don't know if I'm familiar with these, but these are basically bars where you go in and you pour your own beer, and you use like a credit card, swipe it, and it charges you for every beer. You can pick from dozens of taps on the wall, and no bartender totally cuts them out. But the idea that that's not regulated at all, the point of a bartender, besides just bringing drink, is also they're legally supposed to be monitoring you to see if you're too drunk to drink, if you're a danger to yourself, and there's no real oversight of that when you are just grabbing your own drink and walking away. So the question is going to be how that's enforced, and then I'm waiting to see what happens with delivery. I think that's going to be the next big step, because some states allow it, some states don't. The idea that I could, pop onto Amazon, order a beer, and have it delivered by drone to my house in half an hour. I'm feeling thirsty. I need a 6-pack. Bring it. That's also something I think we're looking at. And again, it's a total patchwork of states, as Teresa mentioned earlier, in terms of distribution. Some states you're allowed to have beer delivery by Amazon and Whole Foods, and in some states there's no way that's going to get through. So I think that's going to be the next big frontier is going to be politics.
I'd also say that well, you were from Wisconsin, and from what I'm told, beer is so heavily regulated in Wisconsin. It's such a integral part of the state that even when they named the baseball team, I forget what city, it had some connection to beer.
Thank you very much.
You can listen to the FuseBox Radio Broadcast via iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Podcast Addict, and your other favorite podcast players. Check out the FuseBox Radio's official website for our latest episodes, events, and more at FuseBoxRadioOnline.com. You can also visit us on Facebook at Facebook.com/FuseBox Radio Show, Twitter at Twitter.com/FuseBox Radio, and Instagram at Instagram.com/FuseBox Radio. Feel free to contact us at FuseBoxRadio@gmail.com to submit music for airplay consideration,